So, good evening, everyone, and welcome back. It's good to see everyone. We're holding Parshas Vayakhel. On the bottom of the first page, you'll notice a timeline that a bracha.
The bracha.
Okay, let's start with the bracha. That's true. For those who didn't have a chance yet to make the bracha on the Torah today in the morning, please join together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al divrei Torah. Okay, thank you, Glenn. So this timeline is what you're looking at. What you're looking at is actually the very first Yom Kippur. You see, the 10th day of Tishrei is Yom Kippur. Kippur is the day Moses came down with the second pair of tablets, and everyone knew that they were forgiven for the sin of the golden calf. Now, ever since they committed that sin of the golden calf, the clouds of glory, the Ananei HaKavod, wasn't there to protect them. And it still didn't come back, even after Moshe came down. Moshe comes down on a Thursday. This is according to some calculations, okay? He comes down on a Thursday. The next day, Friday, is this week's parsha, Vayakhel. He assembles. He gathers all the Jewish people together, men, women, and children, everyone together. And he tells them, I have a new mitzvah. I want to share with you a new mitzvah. What's the new mitzvah? That everyone, it's a mitzvah that we already know because we learned about it, but he's telling it to them for the first time, that they should all contribute materials, gold, silver, copper, and he goes through a list of 13 different materials that everyone should contribute to build a mishkan, a home for God. But he makes a stipulation. The stipulation is that the money that they give, or the contributions that they give, the materials that they give, he says in Hebrew, it has to be yours. In other words, if it's like money that you're not sure if it belongs to you or your neighbor because you're like in some agreement together, some partnership or anything like that, in order to give tzedakah, this tzedakah that we're collecting for here, I'm using the word tzedakah, I mean for the contributions of the Mishkan, this truma, it has to be yours. So what happened? Thousands of people start lining up in front of Moses. What are they lining up for? They come together with their business partners, they come together with their neighbors, and they're like, well, we have this agreement together. I'm not sure if this gold belongs to me or belongs to him. I'm not sure exactly, like arbitration. I'm not sure how much of it should go to me, how much of it should go to him. This is the day that Yisro, Moshe's father-in-law, observes thousands of people standing and Moshe sitting. Now, Moshe also told them, in addition to the fact that all the contributions they give should be theirs, they shouldn't bring anything or build anything on Shabbos. So this was Friday. Shabbos they didn't do anything. It was on that Shabbos that Yisro told Moshe about the idea of creating a chain of command and having, the lower judges and the higher judges. Sunday is when they start actually donating. Sunday they donate. Monday they donate. The Torah tells us in this week's Torah portion that within 2 days, 2 mornings, they had enough material and beyond, more than enough, to construct the Mishkan. Imagine in 2 days. That night, okay, so if you're with me on the calendar, that was the 13th and the 14th of Tishrei, that night, finally they had all the donations needed, the clouds of glory came back. Every single year we celebrate that night as Sukkot. We go out into a hut and we remind ourselves that Hashem protected us from all sides because it was on that night that the clouds of glory returned and the celebration of Sukkot began. I want to actually spell this out in a very interesting way. We already know about the holiday of Sukkot. We learned about it earlier in Parshas Mishpatim. But it wasn't called Chag HaSukkos. It had a different name. Only now, from this point on, the Torah starts calling it Chag HaSukkos. Because this is from this point on is when we start recognizing that it was that day that, yeah, that's right. It's the Chag HaAsif, the holiday of gathering, of bringing in all the harvest into our homes. It's called Chag HaAsif, exactly.
What did they call it before Sukkot?
Chag HaAsif, because it wasn't yet the day. The holiday of gathering. Asif means the gathering the grain, ingathering of the grain. So you understand the reason why from this point on the Torah switches the name of the Yom Tif, the name of the holiday, to be the holiday of Sukkot, is because now we're sort of commemorating another thing. We're commemorating the fact that the clouds of glory, the Ananei HaKavod, returned. Okay, so that sets the stage for this week's parsha. This week's parsha begins at that day, the day right after Yom Kippur. Moshe Rabbeinu gathers everyone together and he tells them, I have to tell you what Hashem wants. Number one, he wants you to keep Shabbos. That's the first thing he says. And why does he say Shabbos first? Because before telling them about the contributions to the Mishkan, he wants to tell them it doesn't supersede, it doesn't override the mitzvah of Shabbos. And then he says, and what I'm about to tell you now is a mitzvah that's for you, it's not for me. You see, the whole idea of building this Mishkan, building this sanctuary, what was the purpose of it? It was that the people, Bnei Yisrael, Am Yisrael, we, should feel Hashem's presence with us. Moshe wasn't lacking that. Not only was he not lacking that in his own life, in a very technical sense he wasn't lacking that, because in last week's parsha we learned that Moshe took his tent, moved it away from everyone else. Why? Because Hashem's presence was in his tent, and since the people sinned, it was inappropriate. It wasn't proper for the tent to be amongst the people. So Moshe wasn't lacking Hashem's presence in his own home. Who was lacking? Bnei Yisrael were lacking. So therefore, he gives this mitzvah to them, and it's not for him. So everyone else donates besides him. And as I said, the contributions came in very, very quickly. It was a smashing success, this appeal. He also tells them about two people that will be in charge of the actual building. A man by the name of Bitzalel. I say a man, but he was a young boy. And another person by the name of Elihav. These two men were in charge they were very skilled craftsmen, and they would be in charge of actually, putting together and creating out of these materials, making the vessels.
Why does it sound so familiar? Did we have this before?
Bitzalel we mentioned before. Yeah, we did mention.
Was he the son of Aaron?
Eliav was not, but I'll tell you, Bitzalel was actually a great-great-grandson of Moshe's sister, Miriam.
Okay.
You see, in last week I mentioned this, that one of the people who were very part of the story of the Egel, of the golden calf, but he's not mentioned. I mean, when I say part of it, I mean in a positive way, was a person by the name of Chur. You might recognize that name. Chur was, what's that?
That's with something about Ben Hur. Hur is the
He-
father of this.
Chur is the grandfather of Bitzalel. It says Bitzalel, the son of Uri, the son of Chur. Who was Chur? For those who remember from last week, Chur was killed by the Jewish people because he tried to protest. I say the Jewish people, maybe the Erev Rav, actually, the mixed multitude, the Egyptians that went along with the Jewish people, that those who were so eager to build this and to erect this Egel, this golden calf, they killed Chur. And being that all the details of the construction of the Mishkan are to correct the errors of the building of the golden calf and the making of the golden calf, therefore it was appropriate that Bitzalel should be the one who should do it, because he was the great-grandson of the person who was killed during that event. So, and Chur was the son of Miriam. Okay, so it's all Moshe's family, very much. And then from this point on until the end of the parsha, I want to mention something that Moshe pointed out, which is, it seems very repetitive. It seems very repetitive, because everything we know already. We already learned 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago in the parshas of Teruma and Tetzaveh all about the construction and the building, all that would have to be for this Mishkan. So I want to point out two things. Number one, the fact that it's repeated obviously shows us how special it is. And not only generally how special it is, but how all the details are special. I read something today that really, I think, shines a lot of light and perspective on this. Because you might wonder, so much of the Torah in this week's parsha and the past few weeks are so detailed. How many cubits by how many cubits, and you could look at it, you could almost feel like, what's up with these details, these minute details. And what I read, I'll tell you later where I saw it, but he writes like this. He says, this building, this structure, is an incredible feat, an incredible accomplishment. of really merging together heaven and earth, spiritual and physical, making it a home for God. It's almost like taking something physical and making it spiritual. So if you want to find something in this world that's probably closest like that, he said it's like a spacecraft. That's what he writes. The person, I'll tell you who says it. But it's like a spacecraft. We all know that if a spacecraft goes it gets a little bit messed up, then terrible, right? If one tile falls off, right? What is it? Columbia, right? Was one tile, right? And even as recent, I think, as yesterday, there was an Israeli thing that they sent up, and it needed to be rebooted mid-air. You know what I'm talking about? I think.
No, it went up. I didn't hear it.
Yeah, I think they had to like restart.
Oh, gee.
The smallest of details becomes such a huge deal when you're dealing with a new reality, a new atmosphere. In a sense, this was written by Adin Steinsaltz in his Chumash that I recently got. So he like sets the stage. He says, I know you're going to wonder, what's up with all these details? He says, don't just think of it like building a home and the Torah is going like about, what do we do on this wall, what do we do on that wall? It's much more than that. Think of it and recognize how it's a physical, obviously, embodiment of something spiritual. And therefore, obviously, all the details are important. Just like we could all understand that all the details of building a rocket ship are important. And if there's even the smallest thing off, then the mission fails. Now, I want to actually say something. I'd use this as an opportunity before I go to the next segment. There was once an interview. This is in the late, I think in 1969. Is that when they did the moon landing? 69?
Yeah.
So in 1969, there was an interview with a rabbi. It was like a very public interview on the radio. And the person who was interviewing asked this rabbi, he said, I studied a little bit the Torah, the Old Testament. And it keeps on saying about, this should be put to death, should be put to death. So it's so much death. So the rabbi, this is what he answered. It's a pretty clever answer. He said, you have to understand, for someone to be put to death, according to Torah law, it's very, very extreme. Number one, you need two witnesses who are cross-examined. And besides for that, they had to have warned the person. And warn the person and tell them, if you go ahead with what you're going to do, we're going to have to, testify, and you're going to be killed. And if the person has to acknowledge that he saw them and heard them, and still goes ahead with it, so that's a real chutzpah. So he basically was framing the argument in a way that it's not just where you're killing people, it's a very severe case when someone gets put to death. And he says not only that, the Gemara says that a Jewish court who would put someone to death,
It's a hanging court.
a court that put someone to death more than once in 70 years was considered a bloody court.
Right.
Hey, listen how rare it was. So it sounded like a good answer, right? But the Rebbe, the Wolvovsky Rebbe, when he heard that answer, he said, no, you missed the mark. You completely missed the mark. He said if he would have only been reading a newspaper, it's 1969, he would have had a better answer. A much more correct and accurate answer. Imagine the moon landing, and imagine you have an astronaut sitting in, is it called the cockpit? I don't know what it's called, whatever, in the shuttle, in the spaceship. And after all the stress that he went through and who knows what's happening at home or whatever, he says, I just want to relax. And he pulls out a cigarette and he wants to light a cigarette. Now, imagine what that person is doing. So much millions, maybe billions of dollars were invested by the government into this project, into you. So much training was put into you. And there's a whole team of NASA looking and studying every move that you're doing. No, you're puffing a cigarette it's not appropriate at this time, okay? And if you do, you should know that the punishment should be will be very severe.
Really?
Exactly, quite instantaneously, right? But the point that the Rebbe was saying is, we have to realize how much is invested in us. God created this world so we should live by doing the mitzvahs. And how much of Jewish history is invested in us. So it's not just, oh, come on, it's me doing whatever I want in my house. Stop bothering me. That's like the astronaut saying, I just want to puff a cigarette. See, that was the Rebbe's answer. The Rebbe's answer was, if you would realize how special you are, you wouldn't say it's not important, it's irrelevant.
I'm not connecting the question of why it says should be put to death with your answer.
What they were saying is that
That's not
no,
popping out at
no.
me.
I'll probably tell you what it is. It's that the Rabbi was saying you're obviously not recognizing how much is invested in you. Because if a person would, let's say a person would blow a cigarette, right, in the aircraft, and they would be able to prosecute that person. Let's just say. Do you think they would tell him, okay, so you have to pay a small fine? He destroyed the whole mission that for the past, let's say, 10 years or maybe more, people were studying of how to do and what to do. So basically what the Rebbe is saying is, if we recognize in our lives how much godly energy is invested in us, how much in Jewish history is invested in us, how much teachings are invested in us, we would then see our little small action as very, very important.
You need the first answer combined with that answer to really understand it clearly.
Why?
Because the first answer says how rare and how careful they were not to inflict punishment. That needs to be.
No, that's a
said.
fact. It's a fact, regardless.
But the questionnaire, the guy who was questioning probably didn't know that. So you need both answers.
I know,
together.
but that's correct.
You can't just throw out that.
No, I mean you could throw out the second answer, but it would also be in full disclosure.
Stronger with the
In full
first
disclosure,
answer.
you'll see that it doesn't really happen much. But okay.
Stronger with the first
No.
answer, much stronger.
Okay, but you understand why that second answer really addresses the point? The first one doesn't. The first answer doesn't address the point.
It wasn't as good, yeah.
No, it doesn't address the actual point of why to be put to death. It's just saying that it's very rare. In the second case, you're actually saying, no, what do you mean? You can't just say, don't bother me. What you're doing is very, very important. Okay. On that note, that everything you do is important and we're all important, we move to the second segment in today's class. I called it Sheva Tovei Ha'ir. What does that mean, Margalit? Shiva Tovei Ha'ir. Literally means the 7 good people of the community, of the city. You know, before today's class, I went on my phone, I searched on Wikipedia, democracy. And I guess there's democracy and there's elected democracy. It's not necessarily the same thing. And we're familiar, elected democracy means that we all get a say in who should represent us.
We wish.
By the people, for the people type of thing. Now, so I also clicked history of democracy. So they point out that the word democracy is a Greek word, which is demo, and I don't know what the second word is, something like krisi, but those are the 2 words come together. Demo means simple people, common folk, common people, and democracy basically means the power of the common people. That every person has a say. Well, you can't just put someone above another person. The person has to have a say on who should be their leader and who should be their representative. Now, over there they write that it started like 300 years before the Common Era, is the first mention of it. But we have this week's Parsha, a reference to the idea of democracy and the idea of sort of an election alluded to in the Torah. Now, I do have to be, in full disclosure, use that same term. We do know cases in the Torah where there isn't democracy, such as a king. There's a concept of a king in the Torah. Moses wasn't elected. Aaron, the Kohanim weren't elected. But nevertheless, we do find the concept, to a degree, of democracy in this week's parsha. And where is that? In the appointment of Bezalel, this young man who would now be the one to represent the people, because they all have the mitzvah. We all had the mitzvah of building the Mishkan, but there would be these few people, the talented people who would actually do it. So when Hashem tells Moshe about Bezalel, he says this. He says, "See, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Yehuda, and I have imbued him with the spirit of Hashem." In this week's parsha, again, we see the same expression. When Moshe tells the Jewish people about the appointment of Bezalel, he uses the same expression. He says, "See, Hashem has called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Yehuda." So our sages notice something very interesting. Why does it say "see"? And they they find in that something, a detail of the story it's a little beyond the letters here, which is they fill in the gaps with the following background. Hashem said to Moshe, Moshe, do you consider Bezalel worthy? Do you think Bezalel is a good person for this job? Moshe said, Master of the universe, if he is worthy before you, then certainly before me. If you, God, think he's good, then he's good. So God said, no. Okay, so very good. So you think he's good. Go ask Bnei Yisrael. Go ask the Jewish people. Do they think Bezalel is worthy to be their representative? Moses came before the people and he asked them, do you consider Bezalel worthy? They said to Moses, they said, I don't get it. If God thinks he's worthy and you think he's worthy, of course he's worthy. The point over here is that it's Re'eh, see. Moshe, I want you to look into him and see. I think he's fit, Hashem says. But I want you to see, the idea of seeing, in other words, to find him fit as well. And go to the Jewish people. Don't just throw him upon them and say, here's a man who's going to be appointed. Ask them if they think he's fit. Because, and what does the Gemara learn out of that? Look at this, the beginning of the quote here on page 3. Rabbi Yitzchak said, a leader should not be appointed over the community without consulting the community first. As it is said, see, Hashem has proclaimed by name Bezalel. So the first root of any concept of democracy is in this week's parsha.
Where do you have that?
It's a copy, so we have the same. See that? See.
Oh,
So that's where we first find this idea of sort of representation, that the people had a say. Now, granted, it's true that they ended up choosing exactly what God wanted them to choose. But it doesn't take away from the fact that the Gemara learns from this a halacha. And as we're going to see in a moment, it's a very, very prevalent and practical halacha. And that is that people have to have a say about who's going to represent them.
Right, they can't come back and say, we didn't have a choice. You chose
Exactly.
it."
So, now where do we see this in practical, everyday Jewish life? So there was a concept, that's what I named this topic, Shiva Toivei. I'll tell you the truth, even when I grew up in Crown Heights, even till today, there's a concept of the community council. The community council is 7 people. I don't know if this is exactly the way it is now, but definitely when I was younger, 7 people that are elected by the community. And the number 7 is very specific, as we'll see soon. And these people are elected, and only because of their election do they have the ability to be able to represent us. But at the same time, we have they have a strength, which is now that they are elected, they could decide to, let's say, make a tax.
Oh, really?
I'm not saying they should do. I'm not suggesting to do that. I'm just saying, but they could make a takana. They could say, we decide that. What would be an example? Weddings, you're not allowed to spend more than $20,000 on a wedding.
But the people agreed on those 7 men.
Yeah, we agreed. Now they, with the what's the expression they use? The power invested within them, right? Or vested, or invested in them. Invested in them. The power that we give them, they could now make a takana. Takana means basically, it literally means a decree or institute something that would now apply to the whole community.
Was there a term?
Was there a term? So usually it is with a term. It's not lifetime appointments. Yeah.
Was it really needed, these 7 men?
So it's throughout Jewish history, it's always needed. We always needed. You're asking about my childhood in Crown Heights. Was it needed? I think it was. I don't think they used out their position to the max that they should have. It's sort of,
People went to them for answers to questions, or?
No, it would be more about how the community should run and the funds, if they would have any funds, were it to be allocated and things like that. But I want to, what I prepared for today, page 4 and 5, is where throughout Jewish history do we see this being played out. And this is, again, very practical because, say for example, we are a shul. And who's going to decide, how the shul should run and things like that? So the membership of the shul has a board.
Right,
The board is supposed to be elected.
right.
The number 7 is very specific. It's supposed to be 7 people. And if you have this all set up in the proper way, then they also have a power and a strength given to them by the Torah, which all comes and traces back to the story of Bezalel. That when the people choose for themselves a leader, that's the strength of the leadership. So we start with a tshuva. A tshuva is a response, an answer that was given to a question. But I want to just set it up by telling you who wrote this tshuva. This was written by the great Rabbi Meir of Rothenburg. The Meir of Rothenburg is a very, very special Jewish figure and name. He was one of the Tosafis, is what they call them, the Balei Tosafos, those who wrote the Tosafos, that's printed on the Gemara. And the story about him that really makes him famous is as follows: that he was abducted, really, in Germany, as he was taken by the government for ransom. The government knew, the kingdom knew, that they could take him, arrest him, and ask for ransom, and the community loves him so much that they're probably going to pay it. So he was arrested, and he was tortured, actually, sent to a prison on an island away from everyone. And he wrote a letter to his community, and he told them that according to Jewish law, they're not allowed to pay the ransom. He's writing about himself, because what's going to happen? They're now going to arrest the next Jewish leader, and they're going to keep on doing it, and they're going to know that if they want money from the Jewish people, there's an easy way of doing it. And he died in prison. Meir of Rothenburg died in prison. But being that he was there for many years, he had a lot of leniencies. He was given parchment, given ink, and he wrote a Torah in prison. This Torah, if I'm not mistaken, I think still exists.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
How could he remember the whole Torah?
Right.
First of all, we're talking about Meir of Rothenburg, incredible. Like I'm telling you, in terms of
today that I've met that have the entire Torah
in their memory. Yeah. But also at the same time, I'm pretty sure that that's the way he did it from memory, but it's very possible that he was given also some books as well. And it could be what he wanted to do is to have a proper Torah and parchment and ink. Anyway, so that's the setting the stage for the person who we're about to read his works. And he writes like this: if there is a dispute among your community and they can't unanimously decide who the leader should be, some say one group and some say another group, we're not sure who the leaders should be, it seems to me that one should gather all of the people who pay taxes, which basically means the members of the community. So let's say a shul would be not who could have a say. Only the people that pay the membership should have a say. And they should accept upon themselves to make a decision for the sake of heaven. It's interesting stipulation there. They should say, we're doing this, obviously not doing it for any self-interest. I'm not choosing any person because I feel that they're going to be better to me, but it's for the sake of heaven. I really believe that this is the right person to represent us. And in the best interests of the city, and the majority should be followed. Whether to choose leaders or to choose a cantor or etc., it should all follow this process. Process should be an election. So it's amazing. I mean, you're talking about in a time that how much of the world was even thinking about elections? Probably nobody. This is 1215 is when he lived, and he passed away 1293. No one else is thinking about elections. And Rabbi Rothenburg is saying that based on the Gemara that learns from Betzalel in this week's Parsha, elections is the way to go.
He knew in the future it would be very important.
Yeah, I mean, not only in the future, I would say he saw in Torah wisdom that is the way. That is the way to do it. And just to show you, in halacha, these 7 people have very, very strong strength, a lot of strength for what they're able to do. To quote the Shulchan Aruch, it says, the Ramah writes, so is the custom in all places that the Tovei Ha'ir, which are these representatives of the city, is like the Beis Din Agadol, which basically means the high court in Jerusalem. Whatever the high court in Jerusalem was able to institute, in this city, these elected representatives have that strength as well. And to continue reading from the Gemara, from the Halacha, the Ramah writes like this: members of a city can compel each other to build the city's walls and bolted gates, to dig cisterns and water channels, and to provide wages for police and guardsmen. By the way, that was not a political thing about building a wall. It's in Shulchan Aruch. I didn't realize that until I read it just now. This is the law.
You slipped that in very well.
I did. I'm just telling you that was not any statement. This is the law as well for all the needs of the city, compelling each other to contribute. A city is empowered to decide its own needs and to fund projects that will address them. It can compel those who disagree to comply with the will of the majority. All the householders who pay taxes should be assembled, and all should resolve to say their opinion, meaning to cast their vote for it, for the sake of heaven, and then follow the majority. If, this is interesting, if the minority refuses, the majority has the power to compel them. In other words, they could actually start taking property and saying, if you don't, let's say they make a tax. Let's say the community decides on a tax, it follows the majority. And one who and then he makes an interesting point at the end. He says, one who abstains from giving his opinion, someone who says, okay, but I didn't vote. So there is ignored. And we follow the majority of those who speak.
What's the significance of 7? Just so there'd be a majority?
I think it also has to be a majority, and we want a number. There's something very special. What's interesting about your point is, right. Yeah, but I think it's actually more technical in this case in terms of diversity of opinion.
Didn't you just say that one could abstain, so that would leave?
No, when I say abstain is that a person in the community who didn't vote can say,
okay.
oh, I didn't elect these people.
Okay. I see what you're saying, okay.
They can't go around saying, and again, I'm just making this into a reality, can't go around saying, not my president, just because they didn't vote. The majority did, so that's what they have to do. Now, what's interesting about the number 7 is that it does say clearly in halacha that if there isn't 7, if there are 6 or 5, they do not have the same strength. So even if one of those 7 passes away, they would lose their strength until one of them that one is replaced. There's something about the representation of 7, halacha sees, that would be a fair amount of people, that you'd be able to follow these 7. If they come to an agreement, then they would be followed.
In the study of numbers, does 7 symbolize anything?
I remember when I was a child, I was in camp in Montreal, and they took us once on a trip to Ottawa. So we saw, the changing of the guards, all these, and we went to the Supreme Court over there, and there are 9 chairs. I guess the jury 9, or something was 9 there. So the tour guide said, does anybody know why there are 9 chairs here? So one of the children made a joke. He said, yeah, I know, for the 9 days of the week. So whatever, but the point, that's so funny, right? So anyway, the point is, I don't think 7 has to do with any, obviously you could go deeper and esoteric and say there's something about the number of 7. But I think in this case it's really about a solid representation is with the number 7.
I
So.
have a non-rabbinical question. How many people are on the Supreme Court?
9, right?
9?
I don't remember.
I'm not sure.
Oh, wow.
Nobody in the
No,
Supreme
I'm pretty sure 9, yeah? You want to start counting? 9, right?
Court? Do the
For
Michael.
the days of the week.
Yeah, do that. That's a good one.
I'm pretty sure. I'm not saying 100.
Sheva has a lot of meanings, right?
Right.
Sheva is to sit,
No,
to sit on
Shev.
the court. It's like the number 7, it's
Sheva, it's true, and Sheva also means to be full and satiated. But although obviously everything is connected, I think in this case we shouldn't get lost from the idea of proper representation. No one was able to find out yet if the number is 9.
Can't believe it.
So who decided, who decided to make it 7?
It can't be 8.
It's led by one justice called
Oh, it's
Chief Justice.
Chief Justice and 8
The other
others, so it's
8
9.
No, it says that the other 8 justices are known as
That's
Associate Justice.
That's right. So you have
That's
9.
the 9, obviously not, right? You have to have an odd number.
So who chose to have 7? Who made that?
So we're asking where does it come from in Allah? Where's the original? It's meant, the Gemara, the Chachamim, the sages in the Gemara recognize that the number 7 would be the best representation. You want to do? Should we do some trivia? Can we name all 9?
Let's move on.
Okay, let's move on. I think I could.
We want to
could.
hear a good story at the end.
Okay, that's true. Okay, what time is it?
8:15.
8:15. Okay, very good. Another thing is, it's important to point out, and this is also true with American elections, that they don't have to be the wisest and they don't have to be the richest. As long as the majority of people, invested their trust in them, then they are the representatives. You can't come and say, "Oh, what do you know?" Just from the fact that they have been elected gives them that strength. That's what Allah says. The Sheva Tov Ve'ir are not the wisest or richest, but those whom the community have appointed upon them. That is their strength, just by virtue of election, gives them that position. Now, I want to turn in this topic to another point, which is, again, another response, another tshuva, this time written by the Chassam Sofer, so that would be a little over 200 years ago, 250 years ago, around that time. And he was presented with a question. The question he was presented with was a rabbi who was appointed by the government without the consent of the community. Now, this became a very common thing in Europe. They were known as a Rav Mitam. Rav Mitam means they weren't elected by the people, they weren't chosen by the people, they were forced upon the people. Okay, basically they were not, the government, they had some connections, and the government found an interest in having this person as the rabbi there, so they appointed them. And it led to obviously a lot of issues, and in a lot of cities you had two rabbis, the rabbi of the government and the rabbi of the community. And obviously the rabbi of the government had more strength from a government standpoint, but not from the people's standpoint. And it really did make a lot of issues. So he was presented, I guess, with one such case, and they asked him the following question. Number one, are we obligated, or even are we permitted to treat him with rabbinic respect? Just because he might actually be a Talmud Chacham and a wise guy, and a knowledgeable person, and a Torah scholar. And has he acted in accordance with halachic law to accept that position? Those are the two questions he was asked. So the Chassam Sofer answers like this. He says, this rabbi, and he uses an expression, he says, even if he were tall as a cedar tree, or strong as an oak tree, meaning it's an expression for a tzaddik, even if he was really righteous and really, really knowledgeable, and a great Torah scholar, he acted inappropriately to rise on the wings of the heights of the city with force. And where is his Talmudic wisdom, which says, we do not appoint a leader of the community without consulting with the people? Where do we learn it from? From this week's parasha, Betzalel. And he says, let me actually spell that out a little. Now, one must judge within himself if Betzalel, who was complete in wisdom, understanding and knowledge, the Torah says how great he was, how talented he was. Nevertheless, God commanded through his trustworthy messenger, Moshe, our teacher, not to force his appointment without the consent and will of the Jewish people. How can anyone let himself be appointed to any position without the consent and will of majority of the community?
Nice.
That's his answer. Okay, so basically, up until now, we explained the strength that they have, and now to tap it all off and to conclude, I wanted to also bring how if someone goes ahead with it without consent and doesn't take the heed and the message from this week's parsha, what we see, what Jewish law considers that. And obviously, in that case, not only would they not have the regular rights as a rabbi, but it's almost like the community would not be allowed to treat them with rabbinic respect. Okay, we turn now to the third segment, which we share Hasidic stories in connection to the parsha. One of the details in this week's parsha was, it says that they made the basin. Remember we spoke about that wash basin that the Kohanim, before starting their service, we learned last week, would wash their hands and feet. It was the first service every single day, or not even service, it was a pre-service. Before they started, they had to wash their hands and feet. Last week we connected it to the washing before a meal. So it says that they were made out of mirrors.
What was made out of?
This wash basin was made out of copper mirrors. Where do these mirrors come from? They came from the Jewish women.
I was going to say.
The Jewish women were so excited to have a part in contributing for the Mishkan. Although they obviously very much cherished the mirrors, they wanted to give it to be used in the Mishkan. What's interesting, there's more to that story, but let's just get to the story at hand. This story took place with the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe. He passed away in 1812, so this happened shortly before that. So he had a fund, I think I mentioned this once before, he had a fund that he'd have a list of all basically his followers, and once in a while he would send to the people, he'd say, okay, I need 200 ruble, and what would he do with this money? Two things, but primarily to get people out of prison, because a lot of people, if they wouldn't pay their rent, they would be put into prison. But also for chassan and kalas to get married. People couldn't afford marriages. So whoever was a chassid, a follower of his, knew that they would have sort of, it wouldn't be a tax, but it would be a charity that he would always ask them to donate and contribute. And he would, similar to what we said about the 7 people, he would decide what every person should give.
So he would come and ask for money,
Or they would come to him and he would tell them, you have to give money.
and then he would give money to
To
couples getting married.
exactly. Who need, had to get married, started a life, and so on. So there was a man, one of his followers, by the name of Gavriel. Gavriel? Now Gavriel he had a business, but it was not doing well. It was actually getting worse and worse. One time, he gets a message from the Rebbe, from the Alter Rebbe, Shneur Zalman. It says he's expecting from him a certain amount of money. And he knows that it's very, very difficult. When he gets the message, he goes home and he's very sad. Because all the times up until this point, he used to give. Whenever he was asked to give, he would give gladly. His wife comes home and sees him like sad on the couch and says, why are you so sad? He explains what's the situation, and says, we really don't have a lot of money. We don't have money to pay for this tzedakah. And I feel so bad, I can't do the mitzvah the way the Rebbe asked me once I should do the mitzvah. His wife says, why are you sad? We have to do this mitzvah. And we have to do it with simcha, with joy. She took from her own jewelry and she sold it. And she gathered the money, comes to her husband Gavriel and says, Gavriel, here, take the money and go straight to Liadi, to the Rebbe. Excuse me. Don't wait for the messenger to come to pick it up, because we might be tempted to use this money. So in other words, before we get too tempted to use it up for our own furniture and for our own luxuries, go give it to tzedakah. He meaning he takes a trip, but he goes as quick as possible to the Rebbe. He goes in and he gives the sack to the Rebbe. The Rebbe was very happy to see it. But then the Rebbe opens it, turns it upside down, and all the coins, these like gold coins or silver, whatever it was, spill out onto the table. And they were sparkling. These coins were physically sparkling, like beautiful, like shining. And the Rebbe smiles and looks at him and says, that from all the coins, from all the contributions, I should say, from all the vessels and contributions in the Mishkan in this week's Torah portion, it only says about the washing basin that it sparkled, that it shined. He said, why? Because the Jewish women gave it, and they gave it with such excitement. He says, from now on, your mazel should shine. Your mazel. Your mazel means your luck, basically. I don't know if luck is not the best word, but your mazel should shine. He goes home and he tells his wife what the Rebbe said, and his wife tells him that the truth is that after I got the coins, I went to each coin and I polished them, because I wanted that our mazel should shine. And sure enough, this couple had been married for 25 years without children. And after that, they had children. Eventually, their children grew up, and their business also took a turn. And from that point on, he actually got a different name. He had a nickname called Gavriel Noisachein. Gavriel Noisachein literally means Gavriel, the one who finds favor in people's eyes. People like him. He was a very likable person.
Just because his wife
They-
had the coin.
In other words, and the idea of this story is, it's not only the mitzvah, but it's the shining mitzvah, the sparkling mitzvah, the excitement that we do, the excitement that we have when we do the mitzvah, to do it the nicest, the most beautiful. That is what makes, as response, that our mazel should shine. The brachas should also be, the blessings from Hashem should also come in abundance and sparkling.
Amen.
I want to conclude with the last segment. A good ending?
Good. Well,
The one who spurred it were the women.
Exactly. Women
good
always.
story, good story.
Beautiful story.
Beautiful
So,
story.
I want to conclude with one last point, which is, in the beginning of this week's parsha, when it says, before Moshe tells them about the construction and the contributions of the Mishkan, he tells them to keep Shabbos. But he uses one example. He says, don't light a fire on Shabbos. Now, Shabbos, all the things that we know that's considered what we should do or shouldn't do on Shabbos, the Torah defines everything as work. If it's work, then you're not allowed to. If it's not work, you are allowed to. What's work? In the case of lighting a fire, why is lighting fire work? So this is the halacha. Listen to this. if someone lights a fire to destroy, they want to, let's say, destroy a table. So there's no prohibition. They didn't do work on Shabbos. But if they light a fire because they want the ashes, in other words, they want something out of this fire, there's something productive about this fire.
Why would you want ashes?
A person would want ashes for whatever reason. I don't know. It could be a number of reasons. But don't they use ashes for...
They put ashes in black soap.
I was going to say that. Don't they use it? I think back in the day, ashes were also used for like a form of perfume. No, not perfume. Makeup. In other words, like darkening certain.
Oh, like a pigment.
Yeah, pigment, exactly. I said perfume. I made a mistake. I meant. So whatever. There's different reasons why a person would need ashes. So in any case, but here's the point. The point is there is no such thing as work on Shabbos that is not for the purpose of productivity, some sort of productivity. And the one example that the Torah uses in this week's parsha is fire. If in order for fire to be prohibited on Shabbos, it has to be fire that has a purpose.
Light, whatever.
Light and warmth is for sure a purpose. I'm just saying that it has to be, even ashes is considered a purpose. That's my point. I'm using the most minute form of purpose would be ashes. But obviously if someone lights a fire for light, lights a fire for warmth, that's also. What's that?
It beautifies.
Oh, but what's the point here? The Torah is defining to us what is considered work. And it says that lighting a fire is not work. You know what work is? Producing ash is work. What do I mean by that? In our life, a lot of times we could feel a fire. The fire of our neshama, we could be inspired. We could feel motivated, uplifted, like a fire. But if it's not going to leave a mark, if it's not going to be productive, if it's not going to change that we should do another mitzvah and practically embetter ourselves one way or another, that's useless. It's useless fire. If our inspiration, that's what the Torah is teaching us in a very beautiful way. If our inspiration, if our fire is just fire, it's worthless. If inspiration is just, I walked away inspired, there's no purpose. If the inspiration is going to make a mark, even the smallest of marks, leave ashes, something in our life, it's going to make a change, that we'll do a mitzvah better, or we'll treat someone else better, or we'll learn Torah better, then that's a productive fire. But if we should never be satisfied with just feeling a fire. We could go to shul, maybe Yom Kippur, and feel a fire. We could go to shul on Shabbos and feel a fire. But or we could hear a Hasidic story and feel a fire. But if there's no ashes, if there's no mark, productivity left, if it's not changing anything, then it's not considered a fire of work. The Torah says that's not considered. That's not considered a fire in Shabbos because it's not considered work, because that's worthless. The fires that we feel, the inspirations that we feel, must leave a mark. So what did we learn today? At the beginning of this week's parsha, we focused mainly on the calendar of events that took place after Yom Kippur. Moshe gathers the people, he tells them to contribute and to donate, and they do it in record time, very quickly. In the second segment, we spoke about democracy, how we learned from this week's parsha. That's point number one. But point number two, and how practically it would be done nowadays. We're not talking about years ago. We're talking about nowadays. If we have a congregation together and we want representation, we take the message from this week's parsha. We spelled it out with the Shiva Tova'ir, the 7 representatives. In the third segment, we shared a story about the shining coins, the shining mitzvahs, and the shining mirrors, sparkling. And the fourth segment, we learned a deeper understanding of why work on Shabbos, even fire, needs some sort of productivity. It's because it's teaching us that in our service of Hashem, in our lives, we should never be satisfied with just fire, with just inspiration. It has to leave a mark. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming tonight. And we did it, even in this room. So hopefully next week we'll be back. I know it's